I grew up in Western Virginia, in a quiet town called Black Ridge Hollow. It sat on the edge of miles of dense state forest, the kind of place where the woods felt older than the people living beside them. I don't live there anymore, but back then, hunting season practically defined the town. Schools would even shut down on opening day because so many people disappeared into the trees before sunrise. My uncle was the one who got me into hunting when I was around 12. By the time I was 24, I was heading out alone without thinking twice. What happened took place during late bow season in November of 2022. I remember the timing clearly. There had already been a thin layer of snow dusting the ground, just enough to reveal anything that moved. I had permission to hunt on a large stretch of private land owned by an older man my uncle used to work with. It was about 70 acres, thick woods, a narrow clearing, and an overgrown logging trail cutting through it. Deep inside the property, there was an abandoned hunting shack that had long since been left to rot. The roof sagged inward, like it had given up holding itself together. I'd been there a handful of times before and had never seen another soul. That morning, I arrived around 5 a.m., long before the sky even thought about turning gray. I parked near a bent, rusted chain gate and walked in with my headlamp cutting through the dark. The woods were unnaturally still. No wind, no distant calls, nothing. Even before I reached my stand, I had this creeping feeling that I wasn't alone. Like something was aware of me. Watching. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just nerves from being out there in the dark. I climbed into my tree stand, about 20 feet up, and waited for daylight. About an hour after sunrise, something caught my eye, and instantly put me on edge. Roughly 60 yards out, there was another tree stand. I froze. I knew that land well enough to say with confidence, it hadn't been there the last time I came. It was one of those cheap ladder stands, old and worn, like it had been sitting somewhere for years before being placed there. What unsettled me more was the snow. There were no footprints leading to it, except one. A single trail of tracks coming from deep in the woods, straight to the base of that stand. I watched it for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Maybe someone else had permission to hunt there and just never mentioned it. That had to be it. Around 8 a.m., I saw movement near that stand. At first, I thought it was a deer. But then I realized, it was a person. He stood partially hidden behind a tree. He wasn't wearing camouflage. Just a filthy gray hoodie and dark pants. He stood completely still, facing my direction. For a moment, I wasn't sure if he could see me. Then, slowly, he raised his arm and waved. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't casual. It felt deliberate. Like he was letting me know something. I hesitated, then gave a small wave back. After about a minute, he stepped behind the tree. And didn't come back out. I kept watching, expecting him to reappear on the other side. He never did. I didn't hear footsteps. No crunch of snow. Nothing. Around 10 o'clock, I climbed down, telling myself I needed to stretch and maybe move around a bit. I walked toward where I'd seen him. When I reached the tree he had been standing behind, the snow told a different story. There were no tracks. None. The ground was untouched, except for my own footprints. The only trail I could find was that same single set of prints leading toward the ladder stand. I followed them. They ended right at the base. I looked up. The stand was empty. The seat had a thin, undisturbed layer of snow on it. That's when the unease turned into something heavier, something closer to fear. I started heading back. On the way, I noticed a strip of orange fabric tied to a branch at eye level. It looked like it had been torn from a hunting vest. Then I saw another. And another. They were spaced out, tied at different heights, almost like markers, but too deliberate to be random. That was the first moment I thought about leaving. Around noon, I went back to my truck to eat and warm up. Nothing happened while I sat there, but the feeling didn't go away. It felt like the tree was watching me. Still, I convinced myself I was overreacting. I went back in around 2 p.m. That's when things got worse. About an hour before sunset, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Heavy. Too deliberate to be an animal. I turned. About 30 yards back, I saw him again. The same man. This time, he was closer. I could see his face more clearly, patchy beard, pale skin, like he hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. And that smile. It wasn't right. Barely showing teeth, but fixed. Unmoving. In his right hand, he held something. At first, I thought it was a stick. Then I saw the handle. Yellow and black. A small axe. He said nothing. Just stared. I asked if he had permission to be there. No response. We stood like that for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back into the trees. That should have been enough for me to leave. But I didn't. I stayed until the last bit of light faded. As soon as the sun dropped, I climbed down and started heading back, faster this time. Halfway to my truck, I saw the orange strips again. But now they weren't just on branches. Some were tied to sticks jammed into the ground. Then I saw something hanging from one. It was a dead squirrel. Strung up by a wire through its back legs. Beneath it, a rough circle had been scraped into the snow. That's when real fear set in. As I kept moving, I saw more. A rabbit. A crow. All hanging the same way. Like markers. Or warnings. I picked up my pace. About 100 yards from my truck, something stopped me cold. Leaning against a tree, was my backpack. The one I had left in my stand earlier. It was unzipped. All my gear, knife, flashlight, arrows, laid out neatly in the snow. Organized. Like someone had gone through it carefully. That's when it hit me. Someone had been close enough to climb my stand, without me ever noticing. I grabbed everything and rushed the rest of the way out. When I reached the clearing, my heart dropped again. My truck door was open. I always lock it. Nothing was missing, but my registration papers were sitting out on the passenger seat. I got in immediately and locked the doors. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror. At the edge of the trees. There he was. Standing still. Watching. Smiling. He slowly raised his hand. But this time, he didn't wave. He pointed at me. Then dragged his finger across his throat. I didn't wait. I tore out of there, gravel spraying as I hit the road. Later, I told the landowner everything. He swore no one else had permission to be there. He contacted authorities. A couple of weeks later, they found something deep in the woods. A makeshift shelter, built from tarps and scraps of wood. Inside, there were bones. Animal remains. And stolen hunting gear from other properties. I never went back. I don't hunt alone anymore. And I definitely don't go into woods I don't know. Because sometimes, you're not as alone out there as you think. This happened in November last year, when I went on a hunting trip with my grandpa to a remote lease outside Redfield, Texas. I don't see him often, he runs his own business, so when he asked me to go, I said yes. I'm not big on hunting, but I love camping, and I'd never been to this place before. The entrance was just a dirt track off a highway, blocked by an old iron gate. We drove deep into the woods until we reached a clearing with a weathered house in the center. My grandpa told me his father had built it decades ago, a place to hunt and get away from everything. It felt peaceful. Too peaceful. That night, after dinner, we went to sleep early. As I drifted off, I heard a faint scratching at the window screen. I ignored it. Before sunrise, we headed to a blind overlooking a wide clearing. After a couple of quiet hours, I dozed off briefly. When I woke up, I scanned the tree line with binoculars. That's when I saw it. Something, or someone, peeking from behind a tree nearly a mile away. It felt like it had been watching us the entire time. I woke my grandpa, but as he looked, a herd of deer stepped into the clearing. He brushed it off as my imagination. 30 minutes later, he shot one, and we brought it back to the house. We hung the deer and left for town to grab supplies. When we came back, the carcass was torn apart, deep claw marks, chunks missing. Coyotes, my grandpa said. I didn't believe him. That night, we went out armed, sweeping the woods with flashlights. After nearly an hour, I saw it again, something peeking from the trees. The moment I focused on it, it vanished. I signaled my grandpa. He told me to stay put and moved into the woods. Minutes passed. Then, a gunshot. I ran toward it and found him standing over a coyote beside a mutilated deer. He said it looked like it was about to charge. Relief didn't last long. From deeper in the woods came a sound I'll never forget, a scream. Not human. Not animal. Something else. Then we heard it moving. Heavy footsteps. Fast. Closing in. We ran. Branches snapped behind us, something breathing hard, almost right on us. We barely made it back to the house, slamming the door and locking everything. Then it came to the door. Scratching. Breathing. Low, broken screeches. It slammed into the wood hard enough to shake the frame. My grandpa fired through the door. A deafening shriek followed, and then silence. Whatever it was ran. We called the police. The deputy who showed up didn't know what to make of it either after seeing the damage. Nothing ever came of it. But one thing's certain. We're never going back to that house. Kyle had been trying to get Connor and me to go hunting with him for years. We always said no, until one cold November, when the promise of beer, food, and a weekend in the mountains finally convinced us. We weren't hunters. Kyle was. After a long hike into the woods, we set up camp near a creek. That first night felt perfect, fire, drinks, easy conversation. Then we heard it. A scream. Far off at first. Sharp. Almost human. Kyle said it could be a fox. We wanted to believe him. Minutes later, it came again, closer. No one laughed that time. We killed the fire and stayed in our tents. Morning came with a mess, our camp disturbed, gear moved, food torn open. Kyle blamed a bear. It made sense, except nothing was really taken. We moved deeper into the woods. That day, Kyle shot a deer. We dragged it back and dressed it at camp. By night, we were drinking again, trying to shake off the unease. Then the scream came back. Distant. Then closer. Moving toward us. Kyle fired warning shots into the air and shouted into the trees. For a moment, it felt stupid enough to work. Then the scream came again right at the edge of camp. Closer than ever. We put the fire out and hid in our tents. That's when something started running around us. Fast. Heavy. Circling. Something dragged along my tent as it passed. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Then everything went silent. For a full minute. And then. The scream erupted from inside the campsite. Right on top of us. Connor yelled. I did too. Kyle fired a shot straight up through his tent. The footsteps took off instantly, crashing through the woods, getting farther, then gone. We spent the rest of the night in one tent, rifles in hand, barely speaking. At dawn, the camp looked wrong, but not destroyed. A few things moved. A crushed can. Nothing missing. We packed up without a word and left. On the drive back, we tried to laugh it off. Threw around explanations, animals, some psycho messing with us, anything that made sense. We never called it in. That night, I had a dream. I was back in those woods. Alone. A woman stood between the trees, covered in blood, screaming for help. But I couldn't move toward her. I just stood there, listening. What bothers me now isn't what we heard. It's the possibility that it really was someone. And we chose to hide.